Just to know that as parents, we want to remember and love every aspect of our child's life from the very beginning on. And as we were talking to Holly here earlier, you were talking about your heartbeat. And I wanted to take this time to see if Rebecca could actually give the viewers a little bit of background of who you are and just how God brought you here to the set.
Yes, well, I think we have a screenshot of her book. She's an author of Jacob, the Flapping Dinosaur Goes to School, and I'm particularly interested in this because I shared with you. It's a book about an autistic child who, you have a son who is an autistic child, and I have a nephew who is autistic, and it just touches my heart so much. And the Lord, out of this, has birthed a ministry, and God is using her in a great way, even in school systems, to go in and help educate parents and students on what it means to have autism and how to appropriately respond and to embrace those who have autism. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yes.
Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
It is so much needed for parents to understand, and not only that, but for little kids and within their circle to understand. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, you know, I'm no stranger to special needs. As I was saying, we have 4 kids, and we have 2 with very unique needs, and one of them being autism. My youngest daughter was born with some craniofacial abnormalities. And as a young mom, that's all I ever wanted, was to be a mom. I took it very personal for a while. And I just got to a place where I said, okay, Lord, if this is the path it's going to be, if this is how it's going to be, I don't want it to be in vain. Please use this for your glory. Please use what we're going through as a family, as my children, as individuals, my marriage, give purpose to all of this.
Yes.
I would have never thought in a million years it would come through a little green dinosaur, but that's exactly what he did. And it just kind of was this, after I prayed that prayer, scenario after scenario where God was showing me that there was this need. And then one day I went online to research for something like this book, and I couldn't find it. And I really felt the Holy Spirit tell me that I've set this aside for you. And it really made that prayer, that sincere prayer from a very dark place as a mom, really come into fruition. And I felt God showing me that there was purpose in our very special life that we live.
You know, one of the things that I read that impressed me so much and touched my heart is that you came to a place where you said, I'm not going to allow myself to be angry at God. It was not an option for you. Can you just kind of talk about that and maybe even speak to the hearts of those parents and aunts and uncles like myself who, you know, you kind of question, you know, why did this happen? And you struggle with that, not being angry at God.
I think that's that question that humankind always go back to, you know, why does God allow these things to happen? Why? And, you know, and my answer to that through experience, and even before this, I just always believed that there was a purpose and a plan in everything, and that there is no mistakes made. The world might see my son as disabled or might see our family as less than, but God sees us as capable and full of purpose and a plan. And I really try to speak that into the other families that I come into contact as well. I see them, you know, kind of in that place where they're searching and trying to understand. And I don't have always like an answer as to why specifically they're walking through that. But I just know that your child was designed this way for a purpose, and God truly, He loves and cares, and He's walking with you, and that you're not alone. And you know,
one of the things that struck me as well is the fact that you mentioned it takes 5. Well, you mentioned it takes 5 positives to cancel out 1 negative, and that's an affirmation. Right? And you talk to us about that and how your book really provides that map for kids and
our
parents?
second book is actually called The Affirmation Book, featuring Jacob and friends. We're hoping to release it this summer. And that really birthed out of those conversations that I was having with parents,
yes.
Meeting them through this book. And I wanted to design a book that not only had the dinosaurs and would, really pull in a preschooler, but a book that a parent who has a new diagnosis, that they could pull out and they could read, and whether they realize it or not, speak biblical truths over their child, and really help bring to the forefront of their mind that they are so much more than a diagnosis.
Yes.
And that's where that birthed from.
I know, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Touches my heart.
Yeah, that is really beautiful. Because,
keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt.
It's okay.
Sorry.
I think it's so important, that there's so many families that struggle with their faith when they see their child going through something. And it grieves me because not only can I relate, but unfortunately sometimes we allow that to really pull us away further and further from the Lord. And I always say, I don't know how you can walk this special needs journey without God right there with you. I couldn't imagine doing this without him.
And I love the intentionality of it, of what you're doing. And you are being intentional and using the biblical affirmations to bring truth to the confusion that culture brings us, even at the preschool level. And, at that fundamental child developmental years, where you can say this is how God views us. This is the perception. Now, talk to us about what doors God is opening in your ministry with the educational, with schools or with anything, how God is opening the doors.
Yeah, so the teacher community really helped lift my book up off the ground. That was never the intention. It was a God thing.
Yeah.
And I started getting invitations to come to schools. And I started to see this autism education program just form and mold. And I quickly saw the bigger picture behind this book. So what we do is we offer autism education to elementary schools across the U.S. We go in and we use the book, we read the story, it engages the children, they can identify with the school setting, and then I let them ask questions about Jacob and his peers, which is based off of my son, and I give them honest answers. And what I find is that when we just have honest conversations with children, we can really use those conversations to break that stigma or even ignorance that might start breeding at that age. I feel that a lot of children, they can really identify with those feelings of not being included or not having a friend. So we really hone in on that. And we really teach them concepts about inclusion, what acceptance means, tolerance, all of these things to our disabled peers. And it's just really taken off. And when I see myself in front of all these little faces and I see my own children and I see God really using our situation and using my children and our testimony and our story to actually make an impact in these children's lives. I believe that my son now deserves to be understood, and I feel like there's so much awareness and attention amongst adults, and that's wonderful. We need to learn as well. But my son is 10 years old, and he deserves to have his peers understand him now.
Yes.
So that's why I am intentional about the elementary age students and with this book.
I wanted to ask you too, I was reading about your heart for churches and how to kind of undergird churches and help them minister better to special needs children and their families, because I think I read a statistic that was pretty large that a lot of special needs families don't even attempt to go to church because they feel there's nothing there for their children. Now, I know in some situations in autism, there's certain sounds that they don't tolerate well, certain, music, that kind of thing that, it's upsetting to them. So what are your recommendations to churches?
I would say, one, not to be intimidated. I know that it can seem like a overwhelming task to meet these needs, and I understand that as a parent, but I would encourage churches to really engage with those families that come to their church that have a special needs child. Get to know them, get to know their needs, and then assess those needs. It's no different than how we present the gospel to anybody else. You learn the needs, and then you learn how you can meet them. So with children on the spectrum, we say if you met one child on the spectrum, you met one child on the spectrum. They're all individuals, you know, and what is could be overwhelming for one might not be for the other. So it's very important that your staff and that your pastors and children's workers, that they really take the time to educate themselves and learn about the individual, and then from there go to how they're going to meet those needs. It doesn't have to be as complicated or as grandiose as maybe some may think.
I think you spell it L-O-V-E.
Yeah.
That's right.
Just love.
That's right. You love people well. Love people as God loves you.
That's right.
I love that. And if people wanted to reach out to you and say, you know, I really need some education about this. I really want to be able to get the books or the curriculum and the wealth of resource that you have by experience. How can they reach you?
They can find us on the website, which is the NoahRobertProject.com. We're very active on social media, which again is the Noah Robert Project, named after my son. And of course, you can email us at the NoahRobertProject@gmail.com. I would be happy to help, from parents to schools to church leaders, in any way possible.
And I think it really is what we were talking about, is that engaging and that engagement. Take the time to get to know the needs of your people. It doesn't need a lot of time. You can just have 5 minutes here. You can pick up so much information just by spending time and not being so rushed in your daily ministry work. That some children's ministries, they do. They're running from one place to another to try to get things done. Now, so I love all the illustration of the book. It's beautifully illustrated.
Thank you.
So how do you come up with the images and the storyline? Is it based out of the story of your son?
It's a real story between my son and his daughter. There's slight differences. We made them twins in the book for comparison. And of course, they're dinosaurs.
I love it.
But your son and his sister.
His sister.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Oh, yes.
And they're twins.
They're not twins in real life. We did it for the sake of comparison in the book.
Gotcha.
But basically, during that season where God was showing me how this was going to go, my daughter came home from school one day and said, "Mommy, the kids are asking me questions about Noah." And I said, "Well, what are they asking?" They said, "Why does he flap his hands? Why doesn't he talk?" All of these things. I said, "What did you say?" She said, "I told them that Noah is different and that's okay." And that is the point that we really drive home in the book. That yes, you know, Jacob does things differently, but that's okay. That's okay. And we really go a little more in depth. So that conversation that she had with her friend is actually in the book. And I really wanted to pull from their experiences as students, so that way the message would really relate to elementary kids.
I think that's so important too, to educate our children in how to respond and interact with children with autism, or today's National Down Syndrome Awareness Day, and you know, to just embrace them and love them as Christ would, and to befriend them, to have fellowship with them. I think that's so important. One of the things I love to do is just to play with my nephew and build. He loves to build anything, Legos and Bunchums, and you know, just to have that fellowship.
It's so important. The enemy really, really likes to make special needs families feel isolated and like nobody understands. So it's important that the outside world or the community around them are intentional in reaching out and getting to know them and befriending them. because, you know, when you're living in that world, it can
Yes.
be lonely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's all you're seeing, and you're in it.
Yeah.
You're in it. And it is, you know, getting the education as to how to approach a child with special needs.
And just in sitting here, I just feel in my spirit that the Lord has raised you up for such a time as this, like in Esther, to address a very critical need in a day in America where we're, you know, having states voting for late-term abortions, and it's a crisis like none other. And to have a voice to come up out of that, in the midst of that, to affirm and let everyone know that we're all knitted together in our father's, in our womb, in our mother's womb. We're knitted together perfectly by our Father in heaven, and to be that champion for those special needs kids. And thank you for that.
I appreciate that so much.
Thank you. It's amazing. And so your next book is what?
It's called The Affirmation Book, featuring Jacob and friends. We have some other goals this year. We want to turn this book into a Spanish edition for our Spanish-speaking families.
Excellent.
And then, of course, down the pipeline, we really want to start honing in on special needs resources for churches. So we have a lot of big God goals that we're hoping to achieve this year.
Oh, well, I am already believing that God is on the other side, preparing the way, and that He is going to do mighty work in and through you as you continue to invest in the community all around you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So glad to meet you.
I'm glad.